Hey guys, good day, and thanks for coming back to the next video. Guys, I wanted to make a follow-up video to the one I just did about the days of punishment, but there's just a couple things I'd like to just show you. There was a comment here, which I really think it's a pertinent comment, and I spent a lot of time explaining lots of things in that last video, and this guy here, Drink the Coffee Black, he asks a pretty good question. He says, I don't see when you've included the rapture. And yeah, and I said, yeah, I did not want to get into that. I have another video, and that's what this video is about. But we all talk about the rapture a lot. I know it really sometimes gets some of our friends probably a little bit angry with us when we discuss this all the time. But you know that we're just, the blessed hope is what we live and breathe for. So in my last video, I shared this timeline with you guys. I just wanted to make light of the fact that, you know, I threw out dates here. I don't know what calendar the Lord's using. You know, July 25th, if you use Enoch's calendar, I mean, Enoch has the, let's see here, the 10th day, if you can see my mouse, the 10th day is September 28th. Okay, I mean, I'm doing nothing more than going, you know, to like one of these day calculators, put September 28th in there, and they subtract 430 days, and you get July 25th. So that's nothing more. I'm not making some big bold prediction. I'm just using what I see as a pattern in Scripture. So that's why you guys can download this new this new picture here. I changed it, you know, July 25th on Enoch's calendar. Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know what calendar the Lord's using. Really, I don't. And it's a lot of people try to make big deals about this. I've seen things that happened on Enoch's calendar. I've seen things happen on the lunar calendar. I don't know. Okay, but what I want to talk about here is the month of Av. And there's a couple things that occur in the month of Av every year, that this particular month, if I had to pick a singular month of the year, I have a study document here, guys. If I have to pick a singular month of the year, the month of Av has the most amount, you guys can download this document, has the most amount of rapture type or resurrection biblical references than any other month of the year, maybe except for April, the first month, but not even, I don't even think Tishri, the 7th month, when the Feast of Trumpets is. I think there's more, the month of Av has more events, more celebrations, more anniversaries that occur. And we're going to go over these anniversaries and look at the various events, because it starts off with when Pentecost fully arrives, the Feast of New Wine, maybe new wineskins, new flesh, the 9th of Av, the Day of Weeping, removal of the innocents, the 9th of Av, the resurrection day for the dead in Christ, possibly. There's a reference to that we can look at. And then Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av means the 15th of Av, the full moon of Av. That assumes a lunar calendar date. But what about this Tu B'Av and how that compares with the daughters at Shiloh, how they're snatched away in Judges 21? That is the clearest picture of a thief in the night rapture that's in the Bible. The word snatch, the King James uses catch, the catching away, the snatching, the harpazo. It's Hebrew, so it's not using the word harpazo, but it's Hebrew. But the word is snatch or catch, steal, that kind of thing. But before I get into that, I started this study off thinking about that I was going to talk about the first day of the month, of the 5th month, which is the death of Aaron. And I started off thinking that I've seen a couple other YouTubers and Bible guys, good guys, speaking about how this is the day of the rapture. And I started this study and I thought, hey, on the 5th day of the first day of the 5th month, Aaron dies. We learn that in Numbers. I'll look at that in a second. And that he's commanded to go up a mountain, which kind of reminded me of Revelation 4, But when I got into this, I realized that the death of Aaron is not, I would say, is not what we would say, quote, is a rapture or one of the raptures or one. It might be, it might not be, but I do know what it is. To me, it's the death of the old guard. Because when you read Numbers 33, you kind of get a summary of events. And yes, Aaron, the priest, the first priest, went up to Mount Hor at the command of the Lord and died there in the 40th year. Okay? On the first day of the 5th month, he was 123 years old. That's what you get in Numbers 33. But you get the real story in Numbers 20. So let me go back to the beginning of my study. So we learn from the book of Revelation that the faithful followers of Jesus are going to be made into a kingdom of priests. However, we learn from the book of Numbers that Aaron dies early before entering the promised land for his unbelief at the waters of Meribah. Now, this is confusing. Now, I've seen these commentators get this confused. There was two events at the waters of Massa or Meribah. In Exodus 17, this is in the beginning of the 40 years, where Moses is told to take his staff and go hit the rock. And he does hit the rock, which he's supposed to do, and the water comes gushing out. Then at the end of the 40 years, or nearing the end, the people are thirsty, and they are complaining to Moses, and they're quarreling. They're making a big stinking deal about not having water. So Moses and Aaron go to the tent of meeting. They get prostrate on their faces. You can read about this in Numbers 20. And God tells Moses, take Aaron's staff and go out and tell the rock, command the rock to provide water. And what does Moses do? Moses walks out there and defiantly hits the rock twice, and water comes gushing out. And Moses didn't do what God said to do. He had already hit the rock 40 years earlier, and that was when the water came out. That's equivalent to Jesus getting crucified one time at the beginning. He didn't need to be crucified again. He just needed to God said, speak to the rock. You know, the rock that the builders rejected, the cornerstone, the chief cornerstone that will be the foundation of the temple. Anyway, okay, so that's the deal there. And that was a sin that Aaron and Moses had to bear. Okay? So let me go back. So this word Meribah means quarreling. Jesus made a mention that when he comes, he does not bring peace, but rather division. I had a discussion with a church leader today, and he is just beside himself with the furor and the anger that's in the house of God right now over all this race stuff. He's between a rock and a hard place on how to address it. There is quarreling in the churches. There will be. Jesus says, I do not come to bring peace, but rather division. Remember, father against son, mother against daughter-in-law. It's right there in Luke 12. So what happens here? This is how I see this Aaron dying thing. So when Aaron dies, he is stripped of his priestly clothes, and Moses immediately puts these clothes on to Eleazar, Aaron's son. His name means God helps. It's a form of the New Testament name Lazarus. Jesus' best friend was a guy named Lazarus in the New Testament. It's almost like God was done with the old guard church leaders. And this is the day where the new guard is going to take over the churches. It's kind of what we've been waiting for, really. So in Revelation chapter 1, as Aaron was a priest, the Lord makes a promise. He says, to him who loves us and has freed us from our sins by his blood and made us a kingdom, priests to God and his Father, to him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Some translations say that we have been made kings and priests. Other ones say kingdom of priests. So we learn, when we see the pattern of Aaron, a priest unto the Lord, who was caught up at Mount Hor at the age of 123 on the first day of the 5th month, we can look back and say, 123, that's an interesting age that Aaron died. The First Zionist Congress had their inaugural meeting in the summer of 1897, which was, coincidentally, 123 years ago. Could this date of 123 years signify the death of the old school Aarons? and the Jews and the Christians alike. So Numbers 33 is a summary of events. And it says, and Aaron the priest went up to Mount Hor at the command of the Lord and died there in the 40th year after the people of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt. Now you could say on the 40th Jubilee, which would be 2,000 years, roughly. Okay, and this occurred on the first day of the 5th month. Aaron was 123 years old. But what about this event? What's the true meaning, as I spoke earlier about when Aaron died? Let's go ahead and read. This is what happened in Numbers 20. So we're going back to Numbers 20 from Numbers 33. It says, let Aaron be gathered to his people, for he shall not enter the promised land that I've given to the people of Israel, because you rebelled against my command at the waters of Meribah, quarreling. Take Aaron and Eleazar his son, and bring them up to Mount Hor. So both his son and Aaron go up to Mount Hor. And strip Aaron's garments, and put them on Eleazar. And Aaron shall be gathered to his people, and he shall die there. Moses did as the Lord commanded, and they went up to Mount Hor in the sight of all the congregation. Moses stripped Aaron of his garments, of his power, of who he was. And he basically made the new high priest, Lazarus, that day. So on the first day of the 5th month, the old guard loses their power, and it's given to the younger group, to the next group. Then Moses and Eleazar came down the mountain, and when all the congregation saw that Aaron had perished, all the house of Israel wept for Aaron for 30 days, the entire month of Av. So guys, I've already talked about this conclusion, so you don't need me to go over it again. But let's look at this timing of the month of Av. I want to sort of meld into this idea of Pentecost not being the normal Pentecost that everybody thinks it is. Now, I've had this suspicion for many years now. I'm going to talk about, when does Pentecost actually come? Does it come in the late spring, as most people speak about? Let me get a calendar here. So most people have Pentecost occurring. This is the year 2020. Pentecost this year was celebrated on May 31st, which was 7 weeks after April 12th. Okay? But the interesting thing about the text is a little different. Let me go back to my study here. Okay, so it says, recall that the Essenes have a supplementary celebration, a feast. We're going to look at that in a second. On the 3rd day of Av, they call it the New Wine Festival. And up until this day, no one is allowed to drink new wine. Recall that Jesus' first recorded miracle was to turn water into wine on the 3rd day, from John chapter 2. And this new wine festival from the Essenes is on the 3rd day of Av. Also recall from Acts chapter 2 that the people accused Peter and the 3,000 people who were saved that day on Pentecost of being drunk with new wine. So the thought here is, could the real Pentecost be later in the summer at this new wine festival, or about that time? Here's Acts chapter 2. And they were all amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, this is the people who were watching the 3,000 get saved, what does this mean? But others who were mocking said, they are filled with new wine. So we're going to look at Leviticus 23. And there's many people out there that have the suspicion that the actual Pentecost is 2 sets of 7 weeks, or a set of 7 weeks and then 50 days added to it. Now, I've read, it comes out of this verse 16. Now, there's some serious arguments going on among the watchmen about whether this is real or not. But this is what I would say. This new wine thing right here kind of gives me the clue, because there is no new wine back in the late spring. The grapes aren't even ready to be harvested. The new wine is not ready to be drank until the middle of summer. So why would these people make this reference to new wine? And why do the Essenes have this new wine festival that's at about the same time as the Pentecost would be if it was an extra 7 weeks long? So let's just look at now I have the King James here. I don't usually use the King James. The ESV is really the same, but I just wanted to make people who are comfortable with looking at the King James, I wanted to use their words. So, and you shall count unto from the morrow, the day after the Sabbath of first fruits, that would be resurrection, That would be the resurrection Sunday. From the day you brought the sheaf of wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. This would be the normal 7-week period after the Feast of First Fruits, which is in the spring, which Jesus himself fulfilled. We learn that from Corinthians, 1 Corinthians. Paul makes that reference. Then it says, even until the day after the morrow, after the 7th Sabbath, you shall number 50 days. Now I put the word another in there because that's what seems to be implied. And you shall offer new meat, a new meat offering unto the Lord. This is a new first fruit. See the word new, like new wine, new grain. This is new, a new first fruit offering of believers about 100 days after Resurrection Sunday, which happens to be coincidentally the time of the new wine that's mentioned in Acts chapter 2. That coincidentally the Essenes had this festival called the New Wine Festival at about that same time. See, there's a lot of things going on here that make us think that we were just calculating this thing wrong all these years. Guys, I copied, one of the watchmen had this determined the day of Pentecost. And the way he spoke about it was that you count, here's June, this is kind of cloudy, but this is May 31st right here. You count 50 days from the morrow after the first day. So he comes out to this June 20th down here, this June 20th, 21st date, which is a little different than what I thought it was going to be. But regardless, it puts the date around June 19th, June 20th for this actual Pentecost. If I look at the calendar, let me just look at the calendar real quick, guys. This is obviously the lunar calendar. So right here is what everybody thinks, quote, Pentecost is. But then you shall number 50 more days, and you come out to this June 20th, June 21st date. And for some reason, June 19th would be 7 more weeks. But it says 50 days to this day after, so you begin to count on this Monday, June 1st. That's how it seems to be. But let me get back to my study here. Okay, so I'm going to jump off to this. You guys can download this document here anyway. You always can. I'll have a PDF of it. I have a document here that speaks about the Essenes. And you guys can download this. And this is something I pulled off the internet that speaks about how the Essenes was kind of an outcast group of Jewish believers. Essene means sons of light, who followed Isaiah's instructions in Isaiah 40 to go out into the wilderness and prepare the way of the Lord. They believed that the temple had been defiled, and they had a founder known as a righteous teacher who led the groups to the shores of the Dead Sea to found a holy community that would study and wait until God saw fit to destroy the wicked and reinstate holiness in the world. Now, I find it interesting that they're out in the wilderness, as Isaiah 40 says. Now, many people think that John the Baptist was part of this group. He could have been. I don't know. But they have this righteous teacher that actually met them out in the wilderness. And I wonder, when Jesus spent his 40 days in the wilderness, did he go and see these guys and give him this new information? It speaks about where Leviticus 23 moves next to discuss a festival of the first of the 7th month. So Leviticus 23, at least how people interpret it, goes from Pentecost in the late spring to the 7th month festival, which is Yom Teruah, or Feast of Trumpets. But they have this second set of 50 days from the Shavuot time to this new wine festival. And this is the temple scroll chapter and verse. You guys can read this. Basically, it speaks about that, verse 16. You shall count for another 50 days. You shall offer a new wine of libation. So I find it interesting. And then they say that you shall not drink until this time comes. And then there's this reference here. The red text is the Hebrew. I have the Hebrew here. Obviously, no one probably can read the Hebrew. But this is what this part of the red text says from the temple scroll. And I find it interesting. It makes a reference to the presence of Yahweh. It says, the children of Israel shall rejoice in Yahweh's presence at this new wine festival. It's an eternal statute for their generations and all their dwelling places. They shall rejoice on this day at the appointed time. They shall pour out the libation of drink, a new wine, over the altar of Yahweh year by year. And this text also describes this event as an atoning for the wine. And they make a big deal about the fact that you can't drink any wine, new wine that is, until you get to this day. They basically say, we're not going to drink the wine until this day comes. And that kind of reminded me of what Jesus said in Matthew 26. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of this wine until that day when I drink of it new with you in my Father's kingdom. That Matthew 26 reminded me of what's being said here in this text from the Essenes. So there are a couple clues that tell us that Pentecost has been wrong all these years. And really it's this verse 16 that's, I think, has been ignored or confused. It's the fact that new wine is mentioned in Acts chapter 2. And it's the fact that the Essenes have this extra biblical teaching that they went to the trouble to create an extra scroll to work from that came to them from a righteous teacher. Now you remember how they would refer to Jesus. They would call him Rabbini, which means teacher. So I just wonder if Jesus, while he was out in his 40 days of temptation in the wilderness, if he visited these guys and gave them this teaching. Okay, so let's jump to, I guess, the part here about the month of Av and the speculation of timing of events. Now, I did not put any Gregorian dates here. I just gave the Hebrew dates. You can go to whatever calendar you like and determine what the Gregorian date is, because I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on that. So what we have in the month of Av is we have what appears to be Pentecost fully arriving 7 Sabbaths and 50 days after the 7th Sabbath. That appears to be Tammuz 29, the first of Av. Then we have this third day new wine festival. And when you get new wine, Jesus tells us you can't put new wine in the old wineskins. So in order to get these new wineskins, that would mean that our flesh would change. I think this is the start of our transformation of our lowly bodies, in my opinion. But we'll see. On the 9th of Av, people refer to this as Tisha B'Av. That's what the Jews of today refer to it as. This is the anniversary that Israel sinned, believing the bad report of the 10 spies. Remember, there was 2 good spies. This is the saddest day of the year for the Jews. It's not even mentioned in the Christian church. This day, the irony on this day, it was the saddest day, but it would have been the day that the Israelites would have gone into the promised land. It's when they would have began to go. They would have started, and they didn't. They couldn't. They tried, but they couldn't. It's referred to as a day of weeping. And you'll know that God gave them he gave them punishment. He says he said to them, everybody over the age of 20 and over are going to die and fall dead in the wilderness. And they began to weep, and they wept all night long. It's called a day of weeping. Now I put on here the removal of the innocents. Because to me, the 9th of Av is a day of weeping. It's the saddest day of the year. It would appear to be the perfect day that God would take away the little ones and just reiterate the fact that it's the saddest day of the year. Now, remember what Jesus said while carrying the cross. Luke 23, Jesus said, daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, society will say, how blessed are the barren, the women who aren't pregnant, that never bore, and how blessed those that have breasts that never nursed. Why? Because those who were nursing and those who were pregnant had their little ones taken. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. This is what is said at the sixth seal. But notice it says begin. I think this is the beginning of all the seals, in my opinion. So that's how I see the removal of the innocents on this day of weeping. I think Jesus gives us a clue right then and there. Okay. Also on the 9th of Av, this requires a little bit of a history lesson, and none of this next portion is actually in our Bible. I call it the 9th of Av, Resurrection Day for the dead in Christ. So the 9th of Av, according to the Midrash and extra biblical teachings that the Jews have kept record of, it was a time to die. So what would happen is every evening or the day before the 9th of Av, Moses would have the entire adult population dig a grave, and they would sleep in those graves. And then the next morning, they all would wake up in their graves, but 15,000 of them would lay dead, and they would just take the dirt and cover them up and move on. So every day for 40 years, 1/40 of the population would die and not wake up. The Israelites would simply cover them up, their graves, and move on. Like I said, 15,000. 600,000 divided by 40 is 15. So one can therefore appreciate the emotion of dread that would cause them, as the Midrash says, to dig their own graves on the night of the 9th of Av, the anniversary of the great sin. They would lie in them. In the morning, Moses would proclaim, separate yourselves from the living. After a horrible moment of uncertainty, all but 15,000 would arise, happy that they survived another year. Where it gets interesting is on the 40th 9th of Av, all 15,000 who were left were going to go to bed. They followed the same practice, knowing they were going to be dead by the morning time. Now, the next morning came, and guess what? They woke up alive in their graves. See, no one died that night. This is what the Midrash says. This is not in the Bible. That's why I call this a time to die. But wait, the last generation woke up alive in their grave. Okay? So on this 40th 9th of Av, after 40 years, every year, 15,000 would die. You count it all up, you get to the 40th year, there's 15,000 left. And they thought they had an error in their thinking and with the calendar. So they continued to sleep in their graves for 5 more nights until the 15th of Av. And when they saw the full moon, they realized that they could not have made an error with the calendar. So they realized that God showed them mercy to the last generation of Israelites. The last generation of Israelites woke up alive in their grave, and they were allowed to go into the promised land. I think this is a picture of the resurrection of the dead in Christ, who will arrive first. And this resurrection will begin on the 9th of Av. Okay, so we have the new wine, new wineskins. We got the little ones being removed, the 9th of Av. I'm just picking dates based upon logical kind of assertions on where they would fall. We get to this resurrection of the dead at the same time the little ones are taken. And then we get to the 15th of Av. It's called Tu B'Av. This is a holiday of love similar to the Valentine's Day. It has been said to be the great day of weddings. Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, was a joyous holiday in the days of the temple in Jerusalem, marking the beginning of the grape harvest. Here we go again with that new wine. Yom Kippur marks the end of the grape harvest. On both these dates, unmarried girls of Jerusalem dressed in white garments that were on loan to them, and they went out to dance in the fields, in the vineyards at Shiloh. It was said that there was no holy days as happy as the Israelites on Tu B'Av, and Yom Kippur. So you see this reference to this daughters of Shiloh dancing in the vineyards in the book of Judges. This is the one place in the Bible where there is a thief in the thief in the night reference. Now, go to Judges and read this story in Judges. You'll be blown away by what's being said there. But it's when they had to repopulate the tribe of Benjamin, because all of Benjamin was totally decimated and murdered, except for 600 17-year-old males. So in Judges 21, the Israelites, after killing the entire tribe of Benjamin, except for these guys, they had a plan to allow Benjamin to go and steal away the wives so they could repopulate themselves and become a tribe again. So the way it went down was, and they, the Israelites, commanded the people of Benjamin, the men who were left, go and lie in ambush in the vineyards and watch. If the daughters of Shiloh, the virgins, would come out to dance in the dances, then come out of the vineyards and snatch, rapture, each man for himself a wife from the daughters of Shiloh, and go into the land of Benjamin and go ahead and carry off. Remember, it says in Isaiah 5:14, I will carry off, well, none will rescue. That's what the Lion of Judah says. So to me, the clearest picture of the rapture of the bride, of the small group that have made themselves ready, is this time frame right here, the 15th of Av. This day of weddings. So guys, I'll leave it there. You guys can download this document and look at all these things. But basically, I just wanted to make the point here. I started off thinking that the first day of Av was this time of calling up to the mountain for Aaron. And I didn't see it that way after I got done with this study. I see this as when the old guard, the clothes are taken off taken off Aaron and put on Eleazar, the new school of leaders and priests. With that, guys, I'll let you go. Have a great day, and God bless you.